Most survivalists obsess about equipment catalogs and food stocks. However, no one tells you the truth. The difference between making it through a disaster and failing has almost nothing to do with your belongings. It's about following 11 unwritten rules that separate those who survive from those who don't. And I will be direct with you. Even seasoned survivalists misunderstand Rule 9. It severely kills their chances. I'm David, and I've been preparing since 2014. Throughout the years, I've investigated actual emergency scenarios, interviewed people who had firsthand experience with disasters, and personally absorbed some tough truths. Today, I'll explain the underlying concepts that truly matter when civilization fails. These are hardly the exciting combat-ready strategies you see all the time. These are the subtle foundations that keep you going when the hubbub subsides and the truth emerges. Let's start with rule number 1. Rule number 1, your biggest advantage is obscurity. Here's something that most emergency stuff gets fundamentally wrong. Everyone talks about having the best combat backpack, the most modern kit, and the latest survival tools, but here's the fact. In a true emergency, the person with all of that expensive, recognizable equipment becomes the prime target. Consider it this way. You've been experiencing an electrical problem for 3 days. Most people have not made any precautions. Suddenly, you're walking around your neighborhood wearing body armor, military trousers, and a rucksack covered in attachment webbing. What signal are you transmitting? You are signaling that you have resources worth taking. The Grayman approach is the name given to this idea. Although it goes beyond simply dressing to conform, it is about understanding that being unmemorable might be a strategic advantage in an emergency situation. This implies your evacuation bag should not look like an evacuation bag. It should resemble a typical bag that someone may take to the office or fitness facilities. Back in 2019, I was aiding a colleague with organizing his emergency supplies, and he had everything in military surplus storage with clear labels. I asked him, if someone enters your storage area looking for provisions, what will they take first? The storage that announces tactical readiness, or the ordinary cardboard containers. He immediately understood and spent the weekend reorganizing everything into visible but unremarkable storage. This obscure idea applies to your mode of transportation as well. Those glass labels advertising rifle manufacturers, survivalist channels, or even outdoor sports organizations provide intelligence for people who are looking for targets. Your automobile should be so unremarkable that no one remembers seeing it. This is vital. Obscurity is not only physical, but also conduct-based. It entails not being the person who brags about their preparations or posts photographs of their reserves on media sites. Every piece of intelligence you reveal is intelligence that someone else can use against you. The best survivalists I know are so well prepared that you would never realize they were. They drive ordinary cars, wear ordinary clothing, and remain silent. That is rule number 1. Rule number 2, the 3-day period alters everything. This is a time frame that most people overlook, yet it is vitally critical. When a disaster strikes, you have about 3 days before the communal structure deteriorates. Why 3 days? Because that is about how long most people can tolerate denial and little discomfort before desperation strikes. On day 1, most people believe that everything will be okay. They await aid. They expect that the electrical supply will be restored or that the markets will restart operations. On day 2, the truth begins to emerge. Individuals begin to experience discomfort, hunger, and dehydration. There is nevertheless some optimism. Day 3 is when you'll notice the transformation. That's when people start making hasty decisions. I adopted this mindset while researching the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, the Texas winter crisis in 2021, and other actual disasters. The sequence repeats itself consistently. The first 72 hours are your time to either contact security or safeguard your location. Following that, transportation routes grow more dangerous, resources become more difficult to access safely, and persons become unstable. This means that you must make a quick decision on whether to shelter in place or leave, not day 3, day 1. Ideally within the first few hours, since everyone else is implementing their strategies on day 3, and that's when you want to be where you intend to be. Here is the practical application. When anything happens, you need to have a decision-making framework built. Not perhaps I will leave, instead let us postpone and observe. You need predetermined signs that alert you when it's time to reply. For me, those indications include specific news developments, local system problems, and observations about how my area is reacting. The most common mistake I see people make is waiting to see how bad things become before acting. By the time you realize how serious the situation is, it's too late to securely relocate. Rule number 2 is to recognize that your opportunity period is shorter than you expect. The third rule states that water should be your first, second, and third priority. Everyone recognizes how important water is, but most people don't treat it with the urgency it deserves. Your body can go 3 weeks without food if necessary. You will be wretched, weak, and hungry, but you will persevere. Without water, 3 to 4 days, and that's in ideal conditions. In heat or while highly active, you may have fewer than 48 hours. But here's why this rule is quiet. It's not only about collecting water. It is about having numerous redundant methods for locating and purifying water that do not rely on things working. Allow me to clarify what I mean. Most people's water strategies look like this. Collect some bottled water and perhaps a filter. That is not a strategy, that's a starting point. A genuine water method consists of layers. You need stored water, obviously, but you also need to know where natural water sources are in your area. You need several purification methods that do not rely on power or fuel. You'll need containers to collect and transport water, and you must understand how much water you actually require. Here's a number that surprised me when I first calculated it. A single person need roughly 1 gallon every day for drinking and basic hygiene. That's just the baseline endurance. If you wish to cook, clean dishes, or maintain proper hygiene, you'll need 2 to 3 gallons per person every day. That equates to 8 to 12 gallons each household of 4 people. For 30 days, you're talking about 240 to 360 gallons. That is extremely heavy, cumbersome, and takes up a lot of space. This is why your water strategy cannot simply be accumulation. You require renewable acquisition. Back in 2016, my neighborhood received a water pollution alarm. Nothing major occurred. However, we were under a boil water advisory for almost 4 days. I saw people crowding the markets, attempting to get bottled water that was already out. Meanwhile, I filled every container I owned from the faucet before the advisory went into effect, and I prepared my filtering equipment. I wasn't concerned because I'd already considered this situation. The practical measures here are simple but often overlooked. First, collect whatever you can. I have a rotating supply of bottled water and many 5-gallon containers that I go through. Second, use at least 2 separate purification methods. I have gravity-fed filter equipment, purification tablets, and the ability to build a basic charcoal and sand filter if necessary. Third, be familiar with the locations of your local water sources. Where are the streams, ponds, and retention basins around you? In an emergency, a swimming pool can also serve as a water source, provided it is properly purified. Rule number 3 is straightforward. Water must be secured first and foremost. Now, before we get into the remainder of these concepts, I'd like to share something with you that is directly related to what we're talking about, since I understand how overwhelming readiness can be, especially when you're trying to decide priorities while working with a limited budget. I assembled a completely free tutorial that talks you through something I wish I'd had when I started prepping. It's called the $50 Food Reserve Guide, and it explains how to turn $50 into a 90-day food reserve in case life becomes unpredictable. This is not a theoretical strategy. It's the exact shopping catalog with specific brands and prices, 37 important preparation things that most people overlook, and simple accumulation strategies that work in any home or apartment, even if you think you don't have enough space. The guide contains emergency meals that can be prepared with no cooking fuel or electricity, storage solutions that keep everything fresh for years, and a step-by-step approach to confidently expanding from 1 week to 3 months. It's all yours completely free. I'll include the link in the description and pin it to the comments. Simply let me know where to send it, and it's yours. Okay, let's come back to these key survival rules. The 4th rule states that calories are currency in a crisis. This is a concept that does not receive nearly enough attention. In an emergency, your energy is limited, and each activity requires calories that you may not be able to immediately restore. This significantly changes the way you should think about every decision you make. Most people tackle emergencies with an action movie mindset. They picture themselves completing all of these physical duties, such as building intricate shelters, traversing large distances, and engaging in confrontations. But the reality is that if food is scarce, every superfluous step is borrowing from a bank account that cannot be replenished. Let me give you an actual example. Say you're in a shelter-in-place situation and must decide whether to move 3 kilometers to investigate a prospective resource, or to stay put and conserve energy. The walk itself may burn 300 to 400 calories, depending on the terrain and your body weight. That is nearly the equivalent of a full supper. Is the potential resource worth a full meal's energy? Perhaps yes, maybe no, but you have to think in these terms. This is where many survivalists go awry. They prepare for activity levels that are unsustainable. They expect to be out hunting, gathering, fortifying, and patrolling. However, if you burn 3,000 calories a day and only have 1,500 calories available for food, you are in an energy deficit that will quickly catch up with you. Within 2 weeks, you will be weak. Within a month, you will be straining to operate. The intelligent way is to think like a productivity guru. Every task should have a goal that justifies the caloric expenditure. This entails structuring your space to reduce unwanted movement. It entails completing chores in batches so that you do not make multiple excursions. It means resting when you can, because rest costs nearly nothing in terms of calories. I learned this lesson while on an extended camping trip to put my equipment and abilities to the test. I had planned to spend a lot of time gathering firewood, exploring, and fishing, but I only carried the food I intended to consume in an emergency. On day 4, I was exhausted. By day 6, I was limiting my movements because I could feel my body running out of fuel. That incident completely changed the way I thought about emergency situations. The 4th rule refers to purposeful inactivity. It means prioritizing efficiency above activity. It entails realizing that in an emergency, doing less is frequently more. Rule number 5 is the fire paradox. Fire is both one of your most important assets and one of your worst vulnerabilities. Understanding when to utilize it and when to do without is a talent that can save your life. Let's talk about what fire provides you. Clearly, warmth. In cold weather, fire can mean the difference between staying warm and becoming hypothermic. Fire also purifies water, cooks food, generates light, and provides psychological comfort. These are substantial benefits. But here's the opposite side. Fire also announces your location. Smoke can be seen from miles away, especially in the daytime against a clear sky. Flames can be seen from a long distance at night. The scent of wood smoke travels on the breeze, and if you want to keep a low profile, fire works directly against that goal. The rule here isn't to never use fire. It's about understanding the trade-offs and making deliberate decisions. Are you at a remote enough location where detection is not an issue? Then fire away. Are you in a situation where others pose a threat? Then consider whether the advantages outweigh the hazards. If you must utilize a fire signature, there are techniques to reduce its impact. A Dakota fire hole, for example, is a design that minimizes smoke and conceals flames beneath ground level. Burning dry hardwood instead of greenwood produces less smoke. Constructing your fire in a spot with natural concealment, such as a ravine or dense tree cover, is beneficial. Using fire solely during times when smoke is less apparent, such as twilight or dawn, can be strategic. But here's the underlying rule. You should have the skills and equipment to survive without fire if required. Can you keep warm with proper gear and shelter? Can you eat foods that don't require cooking? Can water be purified without boiling? If your endurance is solely dependent on fire, you are fragile. I recall a winter camping trip where I challenged myself to go 48 hours without a fire. It was freezing, around 20 degrees at night. I had to rely only on my clothing layers, sleeping bag, and building a decent shelter. It was uncomfortable, but it taught me that I could do it if necessary. That understanding is valuable because it makes fire a choice rather than a necessity. Rule 5 is about understanding fire's double edge and having the ability to employ it or not depending on the situation. Rule 6, quiet is an emergency skill. Most people underestimate how far sound travels, particularly at night or in a quiet area. A regular speaking voice can travel 300 feet or more under favorable conditions. The clang of a pot or the crunch of footsteps on gravel can carry even further. A dog's bark can be heard for more than a mile. These sounds reveal your presence and possibly your activity. In a true emergency situation, especially one involving security, noise control is crucial. This is not about paranoia. It is about understanding that sound is intelligence, and any intelligence you give out is intelligence that someone else can use. Think about what your typical camp sounds convey. Pots and pans indicate that you are cooking and hence have nourishment. Voices communicate how many people are in your group. The sound of a generator indicates that you have fuel and power. Even the click of a flashlight switch or the ruffle of a tent zipper reveals your location and activity. Maintaining silence requires deliberate practice. It entails moving gradually, placing items gently, conversing with quiet voices or hand signs, and being mindful of what your surroundings amplify. Metal on metal is quite loud. Hollow containers function as drums. Certain surfaces, such as dry leaves and gravel, are naturally loud. This is a practical exercise that I recommend. Spend an evening at your home or camp attempting to perform everyday tasks absolutely silently. Make a meal, arrange equipment, and move around. You'll rapidly notice all the subtle noises you didn't hear previously. That awareness is the first step toward noise management. However, this rule extends beyond camp sounds. It also entails managing light, which causes visual cacophony. A torch beam or even the illumination of a phone screen can be seen from a considerable distance at night. If you must use light, red filters protect your night vision and are less noticeable from a distance. Shielding your light source to only illuminate what you need is also beneficial. The theory here is that in an emergency, going unseen is often preferable to being noticed. Silence, both oral and visual, is how you remain undetected. Rule number 7, always have a back door. This rule is straightforward but often overlooked. Never put yourself in a situation where you only have one exit. You need alternatives when debating a physical place, method, or approach. Let us start with the physical implementation. If you're sheltering in place, your home should have at least 2 exits that you can use in an emergency. That sounds apparent, but how many people have checked their alternate exits? Are they obstructed by accumulation? Can each member of your home utilize them? Do you have the means to open them if they become stuck or obstructed from the outside? I learned this lesson years ago while organizing my basement accumulation. I had heaped reserves in front of the basement window, which served as an alternative egress. One day, I smelled smoke. It turned out to be nothing serious, just a neighbor burning leaves, but my first thinking was, could I get out through that window if I needed to? The answer was no, not without first lifting a few large containers. I rearranged the same day. When it comes to evacuating, the same philosophy applies. Never take a route without options. What happens if you plan to evacuate on a specific highway that is congested, obstructed, or dangerous? You should have planned alternate routes, even if they are slower or less direct. You should have multiple destination options in case your primary location is inaccessible. But this rule extends beyond physical exits. It is also about strategic flexibility. Your strategies should include contingencies. What is your backup plan in case your water source becomes contaminated? Do you have any alternatives if your principal source of nutrition is compromised? Can your group continue to function if one of its important members leaves? The military refers to this as redundancy. Survivalists should think in the same manner. 1 is none, 2 is 1. If you just have one solution to a major problem, you don't really have one. You're about to suffer a meltdown. Rule number 7 is to never back yourself into a corner, either physically or strategically. The 8th rule is that individuals are the variable. This is something that took me years to completely understand. Individuals are not predictable, whereas catastrophes are. You can prepare for the storm, the earthquake, and the power outage. Those obey physical laws. But how humans behave under stress is the wild card. Most emergency planning focuses on the disaster itself. How much water do I need? What equipment should I have? How can I stay warm? These are all important topics, but they imply that the primary challenge is environmental. In most long-term crisis scenarios, the greatest threat is posed by other people. This is not about cynicism or misanthropy. It is about being realistic. When people are terrified, desperate, or hungry, they behave differently than they would under normal conditions. Some people rise to the occasion, becoming more helpful and community-oriented. Others become dangerous, and you won't always know which is which until too late. The concept here is that you should pay equal attention to human behavior as you do to the disaster itself. This entails being aware of your surroundings, looking for signals of desperation or hostility, and understanding crowd dynamics. Let me give you a specific example. When a hurricane knocks out electricity in your area for the first day or two, people are generally helpful. There is a sense of community that comes with being in this together. However, as resources grow few and relief does not arrive, the dynamic shifts. You begin to notice more aggressive behavior at distribution locations, more break-ins, and increased desperation. Understanding this schedule allows you to make better decisions about when to be visible and when to keep your head down. This also entails being cautious about whom you trust. Trust is earned over time, not given away. Just because someone appears kind or helpful does not indicate they have good intentions in the long run. Look for consistency between what people say and do. Pay attention to how they treat others, not just you. Also, be very cautious about divulging your resources. Here is an uncomfortable fact. Advertising your preparation prior to a crisis is silly, but advertising it during a crisis is dangerous. If people know you have food, water, or shelter, you become a target. This is why the Grayman approach from Rule 1 is so important. The best security is not needing it because no one knows you have anything to seize. The 8th rule is to recognize that the human element is the most unpredictable and often dangerous feature of any emergency situation. The 9th rule states that habit is a weakness. Here's a rule that surprises many people. Predictability leaves you vulnerable. When you develop predictable patterns, you create opportunities for others to take advantage of. Consider your typical daily life. You probably leave for work at the same time every day, you frequent the same markets, you travel the same paths. Predictability is acceptable in a stable society governed by the rule of law. However, in a crisis, being predictable is dangerous. Why? Because patterns tell them everything, whether they are looking for an opportunity or have malicious intentions. If you leave your house at the same time every day, you're susceptible. If you go to the same water source at the same time, someone may be waiting. If you keep your reserves in the same obvious spot, they will look there first. The key is to modify your patterns. Change your routes, vary your timing, and mix up your routines so that there is no predictable pattern to attack. This applies to everything from when you cook meals, and the smoke becomes evident, to when you inspect your perimeter and how you store your reserves. I still do this in tiny ways. When I drive on a daily basis, I use different routes. I don't share my schedule on digital platforms. I maintain my ready reserves spread throughout various areas rather than all in one conspicuous location. These habits foster an unpredictable attitude, which could be useful in a crisis situation. This rule is equally applicable to defense measures. If you have a security routine, such as checking doors at specific times or rotating watch schedules, those patterns can be identified and exploited. Mix things up. Use random timing. Do not allow anyone, friend, or foe to foresee your movements or activities. Rule 9 is about understanding that patterns are vulnerabilities and purposefully breaking them. Rule 10. Patience is the greatest emergency skill. If I could only teach someone one emergency skill, it would probably be this: the ability to wait. Patience is not exciting. It does not look nice in films. It is not something you can buy in a market, but it frequently distinguishes between enduring and not enduring. Here's why patience is so important. In a crisis, there is intense demand to respond, to act, to make things happen. However, action without consideration is often worse than inaction. Rushing causes errors, panic leads to poor decisions. Impatience discloses your whereabouts or uses up your resources unnecessarily. The most effective survivors are neither the most aggressive nor the most involved. They are the ones who can evaluate, strategize, and wait for the appropriate time to reply. They are the ones who can tolerate discomfort without exacerbating it with quick decisions. Let me describe a circumstance. During a crisis, you remain shielded in place. You hear gunfire in the distance. Every instinct may tell you to go investigate, safeguard your perimeter, and take action. But the patient's answer is to do nothing. Keep quiet, stay hidden, allow the scenario to develop. Going out to investigate may put you in harm's path. Waiting costs nothing and ensures your security. Another example is when you are low on reserves and know there is a market that may still have resources, but there are many other people with the same notion, and the situation appears chaotic. The impatient people goes anyway because they need their reserves right now. The patient individual waits and watches, hoping to find a better opportunity or an altogether other answer. Patience is equally applicable to long-term endurance. If you're rationing sustenance and you're hungry, the temptation is to eat more than your ration permits, but patience is sticking to the plan, believing that the discomfort of hunger today is preferable than running out of nourishment tomorrow. I've practiced this ability by fasting and intentionally putting myself in awkward situations where I have to wait. It builds mental resilience. It demonstrates to yourself that you can manage discomfort without reacting quickly. The 10th rule is to recognize that sometimes the best action is to do nothing at all. Patience is not a passive discipline. Rather, it is an engaged one. Rule number 11, your thinking is your major weapon. Here's the final rule, which ties everything else together. All the tools, sustenance, and abilities in the world will not save you if your mind fails. Mental resilience, or the ability to maintain clarity and purpose under adversity, is the most important aspect in endurance. This is something that most preparatory content fails to address. Everyone is concerned with the physical, what to gather, what to carry, and what abilities to absorb. However, endurance is primarily psychological. It's about remaining optimistic when things appear dismal. It's about making sound decisions when you're terrified or weary. It's about finding the drive to keep going when you want to give up. In emergency psychology, there is a concept known as the rule of three. You can go 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter in harsh weather, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. But do you know what's not in that catalog? What can you not do without for even 3 seconds? Purpose, reason, the will to live. Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps, discussed this in his book Man's Search for Meaning. He saw that the captives that survived weren't always the strongest or healthiest. They were the ones who had a reason to persevere, a goal that drove them ahead. That psychological resiliency outweighed physical advantages. So how can you build mental resilience? First, experience reasonable degrees of discomfort on a regular basis. If you never push yourself, you'll never know what you're capable of. Go camping during terrible weather. Fast for 1 day and perform something physically difficult. These experiences demonstrate to yourself that you are capable of handling difficult situations. Second, cultivate a purpose outside oneself. If the main reason you're enduring is for yourself, that's a flimsy motive. But enduring for your family, your children, or a goal you believe in provides a much stronger basis. Third, by honing cerebral skills alongside physical ones. This includes stress inoculation, visualization, meditation, and anything else that helps you maintain mental clarity under pressure. Your mind functions like a muscle. If you don't train it, it will let you down when you need it most. Finally, acknowledge ahead of time that endurance will be uncomfortable, challenging, and often unfair. If you enter a crisis expecting it to be simple or for help to arrive fast, you are setting yourself up for psychological breakdown when reality does not match expectations. But if you've already acknowledged that it will be difficult, you're mentally prepared for the task. The 11th rule is to understand that mindset is everything. Your equipment may fail, your methods may falter, and your reserves may deplete, but if your mind remains strong, you still have a chance. So there you have it. 11 silent rules that no one mentions yet could spell the difference between surviving a crisis and not. Let me simply recap them. Rule 1, your biggest asset is obscurity. Do not advertise what you have or who you are. Rule 2, the 3-day period, alters everything. Make key decisions early on, before the mayhem begins. Rule 3, water is your first, second, and third priority. Everything else is secondary. Rule 4 states that calories are cash. Every action requires energy that you may be unable to replace. Rule 5, understand the fire paradox. Understand when to use it and when going without is safer. Rule 6, silence is an emergency skill. Control both noise and light to prevent revealing your position. Rule 7, always have a backdoor. Never limit yourself to simply one option. The 8th rule is that individuals are the variable. Pay as much attention to human behavior as the disaster itself. Rule 9, routine is a weakness. Predictability leaves you vulnerable. Rule 10, patience is the greatest emergency skill. Sometimes the best course of action is to do nothing. The 11th rule states that your thinking is your major weapon. Everything else falls short in comparison to mental resilience. These are not the showy fundamentals. They aren't about the newest equipment or the greatest skills, but they are authentic. They are based on real-world emergency scenarios and recurring trends. If you haven't already downloaded the complimentary guide I indicated before, now is an excellent moment. It is the $50 food reserve guide that demonstrates how to build a 90-day nourishment reserve on a limited budget. The links in the description are pinned in the comments. It is entirely complementary to everything we talked today, particularly the notion of making readiness accessible and practical rather than daunting. If you found value in this video, please like it. It helps more people find this information. Leave a comment and tell me which of these 11 rules surprised you the most, or if there's a rule you think should be included in this catalog that I didn't mention. Of course, subscribe if you want more practical, nonsense-free readiness information that cuts through the hype and provides true ideas. Remember that preparing is not about fear. It's about being prepared so you can live your life with confidence, knowing that whatever happens, you've done your part to protect yourself and those you care about. These 11 quiet rules form part of that foundation. Stay prepared and clever, and I will see you in the next one.